Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion, or a review if you will, of the Age of Mythology Retold beta, though perhaps review wouldn't be the right word to use, because I've only played like a dozen hours or so of the beta, and that's too little time for a game like this. Consider Age of Empires, so you need thousands of hours to have a real opinion about like things like balancing, for instance. And that is really the case with Age of Mythology Retold as well. But here are the things that I've noticed playing the 5 campaign missions that we do have available around, and I am grateful for the fact that we do have the highest difficulty unlocked, because there are some games in like these pre-release versions, they won't have every difficulty unlocked, but we do have every difficulty unlocked. We have every difficulty in skirmish, we have every difficulty in campaign. It does seem to me that the build we've had in the beta is an older build. A build that's been out there for a while, and it is likely that they're going to change quite a few things between now and release. And even if they don't fix every single issue, given Microsoft's track record, I would certainly expect that even if there are significant problems at launch, that Microsoft is going to put in the time and effort to fix those problems. Because they have for Age of Empires. So like the amount of effort that Microsoft has put in for the Age games is something that is appreciated from my perspective. Like, they're doing a lot to try and revitalize this, the RTS game genre. So what do I think about Age of Mythology? Keeping in mind, beta, subject to change. Well, from a graphical standpoint, I do like how the game looks. I think it is a bit cartoonish, maybe a bit too much in terms of the cartoonish department, but unlike, say, Age of Empires 4, which was just silly cartoonish, this is more grounded, and in a lot of ways, with a lot of games that I've played over the years, this is something that I've missed, because you look at, say, StarCraft 2, you look at Age of Empires 4, you look at X number of games, Halo Wars 2, etc. There is a cartoonish style, but it's like a ridiculous style. This is more grounded. You look at the unit detail, you zoom in, you zoom out, there's a lot of really high quality detail. Maybe it's still a bit too cartoonish. People have called it a mobile game. I'm not sure that's really an accurate way of describing it. But maybe some more work could have been done. But what I've personally seen in terms of graphics, in terms of sound, in terms of music, I mean, they kept the same music as before, which was top tier music. All of that is good. The one thing I do dislike, and a lot of people do dislike, is the voice acting.
For another time, Arcantos, your luck will end. And I will be there to see it. Your head will hang from my mast, Atlantean!
Yeah, that is not good voice acting, and it's across the board. There are some moments where you feel like the voice actors could have potential to do a good job, but there's so many moments where it just falls flat. And as someone who has spent a good amount of time talking with Greeks, someone who has family in Greece, someone who is half Greek myself, I can tell you this is not how Greeks sound. You want to understand how Greeks sound, just look at various figures, public figures from Greece, talking in both English and Greek. Where's the passion? Where's the energy? Where's the power, if you will? Because that's how Greeks talk. Like, you look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey, it wasn't perfect, and I swear if I have to listen to Persephone any more times talking, I think I'll scratch my ears out. But for the most part, the voice acting in a game like that was fairly solid. Not the best in the world, but it worked. This is just pretty bad. And this wouldn't be a problem if we didn't have the original voice acting to which we could compare it to. Now, the original voice acting was good for the most part, especially with the main characters, and that's a very important point. But there were like side characters, secondary characters that weren't that great. What's interesting about Age of Mythology Retold, the side characters, like the individual soldiers who, mention one thing or another, that's pretty okay. It's the main characters that sound really awful. Ajax is like the one exception, but Odysseus, Agamemnon, Arcantos, Athena, holy shit, Athena, they just sound pretty bad. It's not the unit sounds, it's, which I think, like, for the most part, I would say like they've kept the same unit sounds. I haven't necessarily paid attention to like the unit sound, but like it seemed to be the exact same like voice acting for the units, but it's the change to story characters. And while Age of Mythology didn't necessarily have the best story in the world, the way it was told, the energy of the voice actors, the quality of the voice acting, the direction of the voice acting is what made it work. I don't even think I want to listen to Gargarensis. Like, you look at Gargarensis originally, how he's introduced, right? And how good that voice acting is, or Arcantus's voice acting originally. And my perspective on this is, yeah, there better be an option at launch to be able to use the original voice lines. And beyond the quality of the voice acting, beyond the issues like direction, or maybe they didn't spend enough time, whatever, I feel like they should have listened, like the people in charge of voice acting and the voice actors themselves should have listened to the original lines, how they were spoken, because there's a huge difference in how they were spoken. They should have listened to that, and if they want to make it, more authentic, like Greek, Egyptian, etc., they should have tried and copied the same energy or passion of the original voice acting. Because like the original voice acting played such an integral role in selling that story. It was particularly painful. Now, beyond that, let's talk about gameplay. Multiplayer, it works, yes. I do notice some balancing issues, but then again, this has been one of the problems of Age of Mythology in general. Like, one of the reasons I didn't play Age of Mythology that much in multiplayer, or very little actually, compared to say Age of Empires 2, is like the balancing of multiplayer was always very sketchy. And regardless of the patches they introduced throughout the history of the game. I don't know how it will end up being with Age of Mythology. It does feel better. It does feel like they put in effort, but, there's still problems from what I've played. But, too early to really give a definitive conclusion on the subject of multiplayer. In terms of skirmish, I did enjoy the multiplayer that I did play. But in terms of the skirmish, it could work, except the AI sometimes works just fine. Sometimes it breaks down completely. I tried playing 1v1, I tried playing 2v2s, 3v3s against AI. It wasn't great because you can't select the maps, so you'd end up with awful maps that the AI can't handle. So there were certain maps the AI just couldn't handle very well, especially any map that had like water in the middle or something like that. But even when you had like a regular map without water, the AI would sometimes work just fine, then they would break completely. Or worse, they would work fine to a degree, and then they would break. Like, it was hilarious. I just gave up on skirmish. So, my perspective with skirmish and multiplayer, not really great. Like, multiplayer from a balancing standpoint, I think, like, there are still some things they need to change. With skirmish, it's like AI problems. In terms of campaign AI, like, let me put it like this. The campaign AI, at least of the 5 missions I played, and those missions, yeah, some of them are just tutorial missions, but others did involve using the entire roster. I did feel it was a solid enough challenge and that the AI was trying to do its best. It felt better than the base game. Because the base game in Age of Mythology could either be very easy, and this is the problem inherently with a lot of AI in games. It's either very easy, or it cheats, or you end up in this grinding war of attrition against AI. It wasn't quite like that. Kind of felt it was very close to that good middle ground where you're challenged, but it's not a bullshit level of challenge, which, by the way, the original game had that in spades, tons of units. You ended up in a situation where your best option in terms of winning a lot of missions, especially in the Titans expansion, and let me say this. I liked what I saw so far, but I really, really hope that we don't have the same grind fest in the Titans expansion. Like, the second mission of the Titans expansion was flat out awful to play. Like, you could beat it, but it was one of the most horrible missions to play in a game in general. Just because of how the difficulty were. Like, just tons of units swarmed all around, constantly, fighting massive armies one after another and not having necessarily the resources. So you would cheese. The way you'd cheese is that the AI would attack your walls if you walled off your base completely, but if you left one opening, it would always go for that opening. It would run around the entire map. Here, the AI attacked my walls, even if I left a gap, deliberately leaving a gap to try and bait them to, go through that so I could mass my forces there, strong defensive position. So the AI is going to attack your walls, from what I've seen. They're going to attack you on multiple sides. So you can't just play the same kind of defense as you did in the original game. But it's less bullshit level. Now, keep in mind, you could say it was a bit too easy, but, if you've played a lot of Age of Mythology before, and I've played this campaign a lot of times, then yeah, it's obviously going to be easy for someone. Because I've dealt that bullshit, I've beaten that bullshit many times before on Titan difficulty. So, but I did feel it was a good enough challenge. Now, keep in mind, the first 3 missions, just kind of like tutorial missions. The first one, just defend the harbor. The second one, learn to build the basics of base building. The third one, just a bit more than that. But the 4th and 5th missions, you have all the ages available, the entire unit roster available for the Greeks, and so that is the AI. And it felt solid from my perspective. So I liked why I played the campaign from a gameplay standpoint. You can argue about the map design. I feel like they could have changed the map design a bit more, make it more interesting, because it felt a bit too samey, and maybe reducing the map size, because they did reduce the map sizes to some extent. Not necessarily a huge amount, but they did reduce it. Maybe they should have increased it. But it does feel like the best campaign experience I've had in any of the remastered Age games. Because I like Age of Empires 2. I feel that was a good experience, but there was a bunch of bullshit difficulty in that, and bullshit design. Here, it felt like they took the time, put in the effort, and really did it properly on a gameplay standpoint. Performance-wise, how did the game run? Well, again, it's pre-release, and drivers, optimization, those kind of things, like optimization is one of the last things that's actually done in a game. For the most part, it ran fine. There were some FPS drops here and there, but I played the game on max settings, and we have ray tracing. We don't have DLSS enabled in the game at the moment, but for the most part, the game ran perfectly fine. Like, no major complaints. Like, I've seen many games that have run much worse. Much, much worse. So, given the fact that I was playing on max settings, given the way the game looks and, things like ray tracing, I'd say it ran fairly well. And whatever performance issues I had did not crop up in like skirmish or multiplayer. Like, skirmish and multiplayer ran, for me at least, very well. Like, no performance dips, no complaints on that subject, right? Except AI breaking and skirmish. That was the only major complaint I would have with that. In campaign, there were performance drops with respect to it. And mind you, in skirmish multiplayer, I did have some very large-scale battles, so it's not that. It's some of the optimization that's at work. Hopefully they will improve on that. But really, for the most part, job well done. We can talk about the balancing. Maybe that should be improved. Like, I'm getting the same feeling that I have with, like, Age of Empires 2, where, like, infantry is not as good as ranged and cavalry. And ranged in particular with myth units seems to be the winner. But the problem is you have some gods, and major gods at that are focused on hunter playstyle. So if you're playing with infantry, or you're playing a god like Thor, maybe Zeus, it's not going to be quite as good as, say, Poseidon or Hades, or for the Norse, Odin. We also have to talk about like the balancing between the factions, because the way the balancing worked in the original game and the way it still works, Egyptians had the best economy, they still do, but the weakest units for the most part. Like, they just are the trash spam faction, race, whatever. The Norse have the best units, but the weakest economy. The Greeks are in between. That still applies, but there's issues. There's always been issues with respect to that. I mean, it's all well and good that, Loki for the Norse can get a lot of myth units, sure, but if he doesn't have the economy to keep up with the Greeks, then it doesn't matter, right? You just end up losing on an economic level, and this is not necessarily a game where you can rush. One thing I would mention with the balancing is that buildings were a lot more difficult to take down in general. Obviously, myth units will do it, right? Quite effectively. But even with myth units, it's not going to be quite the same devastating effect. So town centers are really strong, really defensive. Opportunities to raid, because of the way the resources are put on the map, maybe not that many, because it's very easy for someone to play defensively in this. So you kind of end up in a situation where you're playing the long game. And the issue with that, again, if you have certain races that are better than others from an economic standpoint from playing the long game, that's where some of the issues get created. But, this is the kind of thing that does require a lot more playtime, a lot more hours to really get a handle of. But from performance level, from gameplay level, I liked it. Like, this is one of the games I grew up with. I grew up reading about Greek mythology, for instance, or mythology and legends in general, history. So I do like the design of a lot of things on a graphical level. Could have been a bit more realistic, but in some questionable things, like I can think of the Cyclops. So for the most part, I did like the design at a graphical level. Performance, for the most part, was fairly solid. Gameplay was fairly solid. So I did enjoy it, right? But the voice acting needs to go. Like, I don't care. Like, they clearly need to improve it. It also is a bit weird because it felt like at times the voice acting was much better. Like, Mission 1 and 2 had horrible voice acting. Mission 3 was better for everyone. Mission 4, not that great. Mission 5, kind of okay. It's kind of like, it's just all over the place. I just think we need an option to be able to use the original voice acting. Don't get me wrong, there's problems with the original voice acting as well. There's, like, side characters in particular. Many side characters aren't that great necessarily, but any issues the original voice acting has pale in comparison to the issues that I've seen so far. Maybe the final version will have much better voice acting, we'll see, but give me the original Arcantos. That's all I care about. That's my perspective. I kind of wish they had changed the maps more. Just make new maps, right? And maybe a more cohesive story than the original one. But that would be my perspective. The fact that they changed the voice acting when they're keeping the same story, the exact same lines as well. It's not like they're changing the lines. They're not changing the dialogue. They're not changing the story. They're changing the voice actors for what? Like, you want to make them sound authentic? They don't sound like Greeks. Let me be blunt on that. They do not sound like freaking Greeks. That is all I had to say. So would I buy it? Yes, I do think so. Like, if you're only interested in playing the campaign, I think it's going to be a solid enough experience, even with the horrible voice acting, but it's going to be good gameplay-wise. For multiplayer skirmish-wise, I don't know. Like, they need to improve the skirmish AI. The campaign AI felt a lot better than the skirmish AI. And we'll talk about multiplayer balance once the game comes out. It's too early to tell on that. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.